Hello, everyone. I'm Alolan Tales, and today I have a very special video for you. I am interviewing top 32 Milwaukee player Christian Fontenot, and I decided to interview him because he had one of the most unique deck lists from the Milwaukee Regional Championship. Go ahead and introduce yourself, Christian.
Yeah, hi, my name is Christian. I most recently played Arceus Klefki to a 17th place finish at the Milwaukee Regional Championships. Prior to this, I was known mainly for playing Reggies, and yeah, it feels good to be doing well with other decks.
Yeah, awesome. So, from my understanding, you're part of is it the Lost Blender, Lost Kitchen team?
Yeah, Lost Zone Kitchen.
Lost Zone Kitchen, right.
Hmm.
And I noticed that there were some other players from the Lost Zone Kitchen who were playing the same 60 cards as you.
Yep.
Who came up with the deck idea?
So there's a pretty funny story behind this. I talked about it briefly in my interview from the stream game, but basically, this deck, I think it was primarily teammate Dominic Viola who came up with it, with a little bit of
Hmm.
help from Sawyer Melban and I think Makani Tran as well. Just kind of like going back and forth and of like on different ideas, and it just kind of started off as like, hey, this looks like a really fun counter meta deck. To hey, let's play it on like the live ladder just for fun, right? See what happens. And then me and Joe Turrentine, who ended up being the top two placers with the deck, um, went like on this crazy win streak like collectively on live like Tuesday night, like the week before the tournament. Um, and we just kind of picked up the deck and said, yeah, I mean, we both have our invites, we have nothing to lose. There's no real stakes, so it's like play a risky deck that we had differing confidence in. Some were really confident in the deck. I was not going into the tournament originally. Um, but yeah, just hey, this deck is cool. It should beat pretty much everything in the meta. See where it takes us, and it took both me and Joe pretty far.
Awesome. Now, for the viewers who don't know anything about the deck, could you give
Mm-hmm.
like a quick little rundown about the deck and your deck building process?
Yeah, so this deck revolves heavily around really mainly three cards, and that is Klefki from Scarlet and Violet base set, Judge, and Path to the Peak. And basically, the idea is that you're going to stop your opponent from playing the game by any means necessary. Like if your opponent is having fun, then you're not then your deck is not working, right? They should not be having fun playing the game.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's this very heavy like disruption based deck, not in like the traditional sense with like cards like Crushing Hammer, but more so saying like, hey, I'm going to stop your engine from working because if you're draw passing and I'm hitting with an Arceus or an Aerodactyl every turn, then in most matchups it only takes a couple of turns for your like of your opponent not doing anything for you to then win the prize trade, right?
Right.
So basically, in the early game, you play cards like Klefki, you get Klefki in the active, and then if you have access to them, cards like Judge and Path to hinder your opponent from having a good early game setup. Because most decks don't function under Klefki. Think Lostbox with Comfy, think Mew with their Genesects, even to a certain extent Lugia with cards like Pumpkaboo and Luminion V. All these cards don't work under Klefki. So if you get a Klefki in the active, then you have time to set up your attackers on the bench, namely Arceus V Star, and then from there you want to the turn you take the Klefki out of the active, you normally always combo that with a Judge and a Path. So you go, hey, I'm gonna go swing with my 280 HP Arceus. You have not gotten to play really anything up until this point. So now you
Yeah.
get to start the game a prize card behind and with Judge Path like already happened to you. And
Right.
most decks can't bounce back from that. There are exceptions, of course. I'm sure we'll get to that later, but
Yeah.
um, most decks, namely Lost Box, Lugia, and Mew, don't have a great time into it, and
Hmm.
it proved pretty effective.
Right. Okay. Cool. Now, watching your stream video with Grant Manley, like you said, he didn't seem like he was having very much of a good time.
Hmm.
The set was over in less than 20 minutes with him scooping.
Yep.
Would you consider this deck just a straight counter to Lost Box?
Pretty much as close as we're going to get in this format. I mean, there are
Yeah.
ways you lose to Lostbox, and they all involve not starting Klefki. So I'll be the first to
Hmm.
admit that my setup was pretty much optimal against Grant.
Oh yeah.
I think in game one, I whiffed turn to attack with Arceus, which
Hmm.
is annoying, but in that matchup, as long as you get like the turn one Klefki, it's normally not that big of a deal. Um, but especially like game two, like I went second. I started Klefki, which is your most likely starter. I think the odds of starting Klefki are like 57 something percent. So it
Right.
is you are statistically probably going to start with Klefki. But then I hit the VIP passes, got the second Klefki to block the escape rope. Got RCS attach, like the whole thing, right? Like set up like
Yeah.
or like starting to put attackers into play as well. Um, and yeah, I mean, you can lose because if you don't start Klefki and they go first and they get to play, they use their comfies and get to like find their Colruses and like start getting cards in the Lost Zone before you're doing anything, then cards like
Right.
Dragonite V and Kyogre primarily can be really scary.
Hmm.
If you don't have an Aerodactyl ready in time for Dragonite V, it will just destroy you, and you can't really do anything about that.
Yeah.
Um, but all of this is fundamentally based off of the idea that your deck doesn't do what it wants to do because your
Hmm.
plan is to stop your opponent from doing what they want to do, right? So, yes,
Right.
if you don't hit Klefki and you go second and your judges don't stick, then yeah, you can lose to Lost Box, but like statistically, you are going to always have these things, and therefore you should almost always be beating Lost Box. You can lose; it's not an auto win, but
Yeah.
it's about as
Yeah.
close as any deck is going to get to auto winning Lost Box for sure.
Right. Right. Now, this deck definitely wants to go first. Is that
Hmm.
correct?
Absolutely, yeah,
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
yeah.
Now, how do you decide mid game when, like in the middle of the game,
Hmm.
when you want to switch your Klefki out and start attacking with Arceus or Aerodactyl?
Right. So it depends primarily on board state, but the way I like to
Right.
think about it is that the more turns your Klefki is in the active, no matter how much your opponent is bricking, for every time you pass with Klefki in the active, there is a chance of your opponent top decking Colress, Research, whatever like out they need, Escape Rope out of the Klefki, Fusion Energy to Genesect, like anything, right?
Hmm.
For every turn you're passing, there is a chance your opponent draws out. No matter how
Yeah.
small the chance, there is a chance, right? And it'll increase for
Right.
every time you pass. So ideally, if you go first, you want to get a Klefki in the active. That's why we play the higher switching counts compared to most Arceus decks. Because if you don't
Hmm.
start Klefki, you want to be able to switch into the active. Um, and you want to get a Klefki in the active, and you want to attach to an Arceus, and your opponent then has a terrible turn one because there's a Klefki in the active. Then you go V Star, attach, find whatever pieces you need off of Starbirth, and then ideally turn two, you're going switch the Klefki out, Judge Path, attack with Arceus. But if you have to take until turn three or four, in most matchups, that's fine. Now, there are matchups where that will lose you the game. Namely,
Right.
the Gardevoir matchup, you have to be the first one swinging, because if you're not, then you're just losing.
Yeah.
That matchup's already sketchy. Um, but ideally, the Klefki is out of the active by turn two. But if it has to be there longer, that's not an issue in most matchups.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
So it's just there. Keep your opponent from getting set up while you get set up, and
yep,
you can just go in and start swinging.
exactly.
Awesome. Now, at the tournament,
Hmm.
what were some of your good or better matchups? I know you mentioned Lost Box is really good. It's really good, or it's really good against Lost Box. It's really good against Mew. What were
Hmm.
some other matchups you had that you did fairly well with?
Yeah, so actually, let me pull up my tournament pairings here for reference real quick.
Yeah.
Um, I was honestly taken aback by how good our Arceus matchup is, namely Arceus Duraludon Umbreon. In
Yeah,
testing, we expected this matchup to be really bad because, in theory, their secondary attackers, like the Umbreon and the Duraludon, or even the Arctina matchup with the Tina, like their secondary attackers are better than our Aerodactyl in the head-to-head. And Klefki
yeah,
does nothing into an Arceus deck, right? I mean, it's just a dead
right.
card. It's nice, like when you have a bunch of two prizers in play, to bench a single one prizer because it makes Escape Rope a dead card. Or if you need to buy a turn, you can put a one prizer in the active and force a seven prize game. So Klefki
Yeah,
isn't dead weight in other matchups where you don't want to ability lock, but it's still nice. But in most
yeah,
arc mirrors, being able to judge path them, especially if you're going first, can be a really big deal. If you go first, you get that crucial first attachment, you get that crucial first star birth. You can go judge path, hope your opponent doesn't find the V star in stadium out. Um, but even then, what I realized playing is that because Aerodactyl V-Star can one-shot an opposing Arceus V-Star because of a weakness, specifically into Arceus Duraludon Umbreon, they have no way of one-shotting any of your V-Stars,
yeah,
whereas you have a way of one-shotting an Arceus V-Star, and then you can just two-shot everything else. So if you
yeah,
go second and they hit you with, like, say they hit your Arceus with an Arceus, right? The next turn, instead of hitting their Arceus with your Arceus, what you really want to be doing is you want to boss, probably, depending on their hand size, either what they did or didn't attach energies to. If their hand size is smaller and they already use Starbirth, you can bank on them not having a switch, and then you can like boss up an Umbreon with no energies, for
yeah,
example. But if you expect the switch, then it is also totally fine to boss up whatever has the energies on it to put pressure on that early. Say a Duraludon with three energies on it, hypothetically, right? Because then
hmm
when they respond with whatever has energies on it, they knock out your Arceus because your Arceus has already taken damage. You then follow that up with a knockout with your Aerodactyl, right?
yeah,
And
yeah,
then they hit into your Aerodactyl. Your Aerodactyl takes a hit, and then you then swing with the Aerodactyl into an Arceus. You get a knockout because of weakness, and now you're winning the prize trade, right? So even
yeah,
going second, you can win the prize trade, which actually makes Arceus decks really favored for you. Now, obviously, this assumes you find the path, not the path, the boss, and you can establish the third attacker like after your V star, and all that stuff. But you are more likely to do that than your opponent is in most cases, and you only need to do it going second. If you go first, you just play an Arceus mirror like an Arceus mirror, and then you win because you got first attach, right?
right.
And then obviously Path to Peak is a good card. You play four Path, so Duraludon really is a non-threat. Um, like if you have to discard a bunch of Path early, then Duraludon's ability can be scary, but you should play enough basic energies to get around that.
Yeah,
Arctina can be hard because they have ways around V-Guard, and Tina one-shots your entire board, but if you go first, it's fine.
hmm
Um, and yeah, that's probably the matchup I was like most taken aback by how like favored it was when we really didn't think it was going to be favored.
hmm yeah.
Yeah.
So similar to that,
hmm
what were some of your weaker matchups? So what were some of the matches you lost against, and how were they able to overcome your ability lock and path and judge and stuff?
Yeah. So the hardest matchup is so okay. Your hardest matchup period is probably like Rapid Strike and Teleon Urshifu. That deck's
Yep.
not real as far as I'm concerned, so I don't normally think about it too much. Now, a funny
Right.
thing though, I believe Yoshi. I don't know if I can pronounce his name. Yoshi Tate, right?
hmm
He hit four Arceus Klefkis playing like throughout the entire tournament, playing
Wow.
Rapid Strike Urshifu. Yeah, which honestly is just insane luck on his end, which hey, fair
Oh, for
enough, right?
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that matchup is really bad for you, right? You don't have an answer to Urshifu. Your Klefki does nothing. If they establish a Octillery, they don't care about Judge because they're pretty much Judge proof. Path very rarely matters because Inteleon doesn't have as much relevance when you don't have a bunch of
hmm
small Pokemon in play. Everything about the matchup is bad. Your only win condition is Path Judge like turn two before they get an Octillery in play and hope they break, right?
Yeah.
Which ironically, Joe Turrentine almost beat Yoshi Tate um, in round, I want to say it was round 13 or 14, by doing
Mhm.
exactly that. Almost is the key word there, but that matchup's really bad. But besides that, Gardevoir and Miraidon are probably your hardest matchups.
Yeah.
Miraidon doesn't like Klefki, but the second you take Klefki out of the active, they just set up their board immediately. So it's really not that big of a deal. They're also more explosive than you are, which means they have an easier time taking the first knockout. Um, I would say that the Regieleki version of the deck is a better matchup for you than the Flaffy version because the
Mhm.
Flaffy version one shots you without having to put VMAXs in play with the Raichu V. Whereas from a right on Lecky to one shot you, they have to put VMAXs in play where you can just go Aerodactyl boss, right? And swing from
Exactly.
there. Gardevoir is hard. Your win condition is just path, judge, pray. Hope they whiff stadiums. If you swing, like, if you go first and attack going, like, attack turn two, then you can go up by two prize cards before they hit their first attack. And then if you do that, so you go up two prize cards, and then you judge path them until they hopefully whiff another attack or two, then the matchup is winnable. But the win, like whether or not the game is won or lost, kind of relies entirely on your opponent's draw and your opponent's resource management, which is never really a good spot to be in. You kind of want to be in control of the game. So
Right.
that matchup's scary. It's kind of just hope your opponent draws dead, more so than other matchups where it's a bit more controllable. Your deck is built around them drawing dead more so. Um, so Gardevoir can be hard, and yeah, those are like the two main matchups that I'd be scared of.
Yeah. Cool. Next question. What was your favorite match from the entire tournament? Favorite game you played?
Favorite game? Oh, there's a couple actually. Obviously, playing on stream is always fun. I love
Yeah.
playing on stream. I've done it a
Yeah.
couple times now,
Oh,
and
you saw
just
you flexing when you won that match to the audience.
yeah. I didn't even do that like on purpose. It just kind of
Right.
that was an impulse. It was
I mean,
funny in
it
hindsight
always
though.
feels good to beat a top player, especially on
Oh, for
stream.
sure. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, also Joe, who I've mentioned a couple times, was in the crowd because he finished his round super early, and I saw him.
Yeah.
And like the main goal for the deck, because Joe and I in particular weren't really taking the event super seriously,
Hmm.
because we didn't need the points, and we were just kind of like, well, if we can get Arceus Klefki on stream, that'd be really funny. That's the goal for the tournament, right? So I get on
Yeah.
stream, I beat Grant, and I looked at Joe and I'm like, hey man, what do you expect, right? It's the best
Right.
deck, Arceus Klefki,
Right.
right? Um, and that was really fun. Yeah, I really like being on stream. I really like being interviewed. It was
Yeah.
fun. It was a great time. But besides that, I had a really fun game in round 13. This was against an opponent playing Gardevoir,
Yeah.
and the stakes are still pretty high at this point, right? At this point in the tournament, I believe I was 9-3, if I'm not mistaken. So if I win out at this point, I can still make top eight, right? So it's still
Hmm.
top tables towards the end of a tournament. The stakes are high, right?
Right.
And I sit down for my opponent, and I can immediately tell like this guy is just here for fun, right? This guy is just here to have a good time, and
Hmm.
I'm all about that vibe. Like I'm obviously like trying to be the best, trying to be like a top player, always trying to win a title. But even then, I think it's important to be relaxed and have fun when playing the game because fundamentally we
Right.
are playing Pokemon to have fun, right? And for
Yeah.
most of
Yeah.
us, winning is fun, but you can also have fun while winning, right?
Right. Yeah.
Without
Completely
the
agree.
yeah. So me and my opponent we were just having a great time. We were yeah, just hanging out, talking a bunch, playing Pokemon, right? Like whenever like
Hmm.
any of us like drew poorly or like someone made a cool play, it was like, oh that's sick or ah damn or like whatever, right? Um,
Hmm.
it was the type of match like it can be best described as like round one or two when like no one cares or like bottom tables when you can't make day two anymore. That was the
Yeah.
atmosphere, except this is at table like 10,
That's
right?
crazy.
And
Yeah.
round 13. I mean, this was an important game for both
Yeah.
of us.
Right.
Um, and the way it ended was in game three, I was ahead by board state, but if my opponent, because when we went to time, if my opponent didn't bench a Zacian V, I have no way of taking all my prize cards. And we didn't make a gentleman's agreement or anything. We never talked about a gentleman's agreement. No one was suggesting it at any point, right?
Hmm.
But time's called. Neither of us can win the game, but I'm ahead on board state, and my opponent just gives it to me, right? I didn't
Yeah.
ask him. Didn't again? No gentleman's agreement was ever mentioned. He's just like, oh yeah, I'm just here for fun. Yeah, you take it.
Yeah.
Which is just so surreal to happen at this point in the tournament with like so
Yeah.
much on the
Yeah.
line. Now I did proceed to then lose to Connor Fenton the next round, which was unfortunate, but it was
Yeah.
just such a great experience. Just having a good time and then it ending like on a positive note. And the dude was just super chill. I want to say his name was like Jamel. I'm probably butchering that pronunciation, but he was super super great guy, super funny dude, and it's just the type of game that like shouldn't happen at top tables, but when it does, it's so fun. It's so great.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Like when I was at Fort Wayne, I think my
Hmm.
most memorable matchup
Yeah.
was when I was playing against someone. I didn't have a great matchup against them. I did
Hmm.
end up winning, but that's not why it was my favorite match. It's because
Right.
me and my opponent just hit it off, and
Yeah.
those kind of games are always so much more fun.
They're always the best for sure.
Because I mean, you have opponents taking the game super seriously,
Hmm.
and I completely understand that. But
Right.
there's no connection there, and I think having a connection with your opponent is vital in
For
having
sure.
like a fun experience.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you can take the game seriously and have fun at the same time, right? They don't
Right,
have to
right.
be they don't have to be separate, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I love players who are like that.
Yep.
All right. If you could go back and change anything about the deck, what would it
Hmm.
be?
Let me play 61 cards, maybe. That's about it. I think the 60 was optimal. Going into Fresno,
Yeah.
I still think the 60 is optimal.
Yeah.
Changes have been discussed, but um, none of them have really been like better than what we played at Milwaukee.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, the cut card when adding new cards is always the third trekking shoe, probably.
Yeah.
Um, is That's probably the card you're cutting. But the only things we've been like discussing is like fourth boss would be good. Fourth boss is probably the 61st card in the deck.
Yeah.
Um, and I think fourth boss is great. I would love to play four boss order in this deck. You can't have
Mm-hmm.
enough of them, especially when you're using Aerodactyl and you're milling cards off your deck. That can really hurt in the late game if you need
Mm-hmm.
like boss. But honestly, like three boss, three trekking shoes, like you're fine. It's not like you don't need boss that bad to justify playing the fourth over consistency, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I value consistency in a deck more than anything else. Um, so maybe you could cut a shoe, but
Mm-hmm.
I, as it stands right now, I wouldn't change a card. So,
Yeah.
yep.
Yeah. I got a chance before we call to do some test games with your
Mm-hmm.
list on live, and
Yeah.
yeah, it was super consistent for me,
Yep.
and I it's definitely one of the more fun decks I've played in a while.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, it's pretty similar to the new Ting Lu deck that's coming out in Paldea Evolve.
Yep. I
Brings
think I've
me
heard
to my
something. Like
next question.
mm-hmm.
With Paldea Evolve being tournament legal in a few weeks,
Yep.
are there any cards from that set that you think can make this list better?
I mean, the obvious one has to be Iono, right?
Yeah,
Iono
yeah.
feels tailor-made for this deck, really.
Hmm. Yeah.
You probably still play Four Judge because the early game disruption is more important for this deck than the late game disruption.
Yes.
But that doesn't mean you don't have space for Iono. Um, right now, the hard part about this deck for next format is your Chin Pao, your Chin Pao matchup
Hmm.
can be a bit sketchy. Now, if you like judge them turn two going first. You get a Klefki in the active. You don't let them like put a bunch of energies in their hand with Chan Pao's ability. Um, it's not unwinnable per se, but it's not exactly like it's very similar to like the Guardy or the Miraidon matchup. And
Yeah.
while that's not inherently terrible, having another deck like that in the field is not great for your overall win rate. Also, Gardevoir becomes better with Paldea Evolved, which is already
Yep.
not your favorite matchup. And
Hmm.
they're also going to start Ionoing you, which is really bad for your late game, because normally against Guardy, you don't have to worry that much about hand disruption until like maybe a Roxanne play in the late game. But regardless, I don't think the deck is terrible with
Yeah.
Paldea Evolved. I think it definitely has potential. We've been
Hmm.
without leaking the sauce for NIC, of course. We have been toying around with ideas of like different attackers besides Aerodactyl.
Okay.
Um, whether or not any of them are good, I really don't know yet. I
Yeah.
can't say. If they are, well, you'll
Gotcha.
see the deck at NAIC. But
I was about
uh,
to say I'll be looking for that. I'll be at
yeah,
NAIC myself, so
nice. Yep.
yeah.
But honestly, I think yeah, the deck has potential. But we'll see. It's kind of about figuring out how you can improve the Gardevoir matchup with it probably being BDIF next set. Whether or not you have a solid win con for Chin Pao, depending on how good Chin Pao ends up being, we'll have to see with that, of course. Um, but I mean, gaining Iono is big for the deck, right? Iono is a great card. Effectively getting to play like seven is probably play three Iono, so it's like seven hand disruption cards in your deck is
Yeah,
insane,
that
right?
is insane.
It's so good.
Yeah.
And also just like it's not shuffle draw six, but it's like put to the bottom draw six, right? It's really good for the deck
Hmm.
as well.
Yeah.
You probably don't need the Colress anymore. Realistically, it's probably just cut free Colress for three Iono and call it a day.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I think the deck is still solid. You still beat Lostbox, you still beat Mew, assuming Mew is still a real deck. You still beat Lugia. Um, Judge Path is still good, right? So yeah,
Right.
I can't see why the deck would be irrelevant anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um. So still thinking ahead to Paldea Evolve.
Hmm.
You think the new Spiritomb could be a hindrance to the deck? I mean, I know it gets shut off by Klefki, but if you don't start that Klefki, do you think that could hurt the matchup?
It could be scary, for sure. It's been a while since I
Hmm.
read Spiritomb, admittedly, but I'm assuming it turns off your Arceus V-Star, right?
It turns off all the Pokemon V abilities, and it can be done from the bench as well.
Okay. Uh, yeah. So I mean, I'd have to like double check some things probably, but I think it's probably fine.
Yeah.
Most decks that play Spiritomb currently are like Ting Lu, which is probably a really bad matchup for you.
Yeah.
And then other Arceus decks, which is a good matchup for you. But if you can get Klefki in the active, right? You can put
Hmm.
Klefki active, Starbirth for whatever you need to just get Klefki to the bench. Like it could be switching to Klefki, Starbirth for switch, and DTE if you need an energy, right? Or a
Yeah.
supporter if you need a supporter, right?
Hmm.
So it hurts, but it's not like it's by no means like the end of the world, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have seen some people play a single copy of Spiritomb and Chien-Pao, like at some
Mm,
locals and stuff. You think that's gonna hurt a bit?
probably not.
Yeah.
I haven't looked too much at Jinpao from what I've seen, I don't think Spiritomb's going to stick in the deck long
Hmm.
term, especially not going into NASC. It's still early days. We never know.
Yeah.
It's way too early to say anything for sure, but I wouldn't. Yeah, I wouldn't worry about it. Like, you have bigger concerns in like the Champao deck, honestly, than
Hmm.
a Spiritomb. So yeah,
Okay. Now, you already said you're planning on playing this for NAIC. Are you thinking about
maybe.
a list similar to this? Maybe.
Hmm.
What about for Worlds or any other future tournaments?
It could be good.
Yeah.
Worlds is going to be interesting because we don't exactly know the format yet. I'm
Yeah.
assuming we're going to have like the 151 set come out between NASC and Worlds. If we don't, then it's just going to be NASC format,
Yeah.
which could be interesting, but admittedly, I've always been the type to like change decks the night before or like change cards the night before. I don't really stick to a deck for super long
Hmm.
with like the exception of Reggie's, of course. But yeah, it's kind of too early for me to tell with the Worlds. I haven't put
Yeah.
that much thought into it. But if it's good for NAIC, it'll probably be good for Worlds, right? So
Right. Right.
yeah,
Now, I'm assuming the end goal for this is to get Klefki a limitless page, right?
yeah,
Yeah, that's what
yeah.
I thought.
Mm-hmm.
All right. That's about all the questions I have with the deck. I just
Mm-hmm.
wanted to ask some personal questions
Yeah,
about like your playing experience and stuff. If that's cool.
yeah, totally.
Yeah. So, how long have you been playing Pokemon competitively?
So I guess my first tournament was January 2016, so that would mean about no, yeah, 7 years now. Yeah, I can count.
Seven. Yeah, almost 7.5.
Yep, almost 7.5 years.
Right.
Um, yeah, so a while.
Yeah.
Yep.
So would that be X and Y
It was
to
between
Breakthrough?
it was between the release of Breakthrough and Breakpoint. So
Yeah.
I don't remember what the standard format was because in Denmark, which is where I played at the time, most of our tournaments were expanded. So I honestly
Okay.
can't remember what the format was, but
Yeah.
yeah.
What deck did you play for that?
For my first league, well, it wasn't even a League Cup at the time. They were called City Championships.
Yeah.
I played I played like this Bibarel coin flip deck. There's a Bibarel in Primal Clash that for
Yeah.
free
Yeah.
colorless energy is like flip a coin until you get tails, and then for every heads you do 80 damage.
Yes, I know
Um,
exactly which card you're talking about.
yeah, I built a deck around that, and it was terrible, but it was so much fun.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
But
yeah.
yeah, I didn't go to League before any of this. I discovered Pokemon Leagues through the City Championships, so
Mm-hmm.
I had nothing to go off of besides just the cards that I had lying around and like my very
Yeah,
limited idea of proper deck building. But deck building has always been my favorite part of the game.
I agree.
It's admittedly probably where I'm at my best as a player. So just trying out random, stupid, silly ideas is a lot of fun to me, and it was back then. And I was like, hey, I have this barrel card, and I have this trick coin, and I have like a singular DCE and like a singular Shaman EX, and I'm like, let's throw other stuff in here and go from there, right? I think I played it with like Ancient
Yeah.
Origins, like the Evolutions that like changed the stage one's type.
Oh,
So
yeah.
look at certain matchups, you didn't have to flip as many coins. Now,
Mm-hmm.
none of the types that the EVs gave you at the time were relevant, so it was just completely wasted, right? But I didn't know what a
Yeah.
metagame was at the time, so I was like, oh, but what if I hit a grass type deck in my Flareon? Like, it was fun, but it was a terrible deck. Yeah.
Probably not as terrible as my first deck back.
Okay.
I think this was Breakpoint
Mm-hmm.
through mid Sun and Moon era. I think it was early 2018. Can't remember the exact format. I
Right.
had I had seen bits and pieces of competitive decks and
Mm-hmm.
just pulled out whatever cards from those decks that I had in my collection and put that into a deck. I had
Nice.
Lycanroc GX, a single copy of Lycanroc GX.
Yeah.
I had an Alolan Ninetales GX.
Mm-hmm.
I had Shining Legends Mewtwo GX. I played two Hoopas from Shining Legends that shut off your opponent's GX, or it prevented damage from your opponent's
Yeah.
GX and
Safeguard, right?
EXs.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and then like there's some other like single prize attackers I included in there,
Mm-hmm.
and like it was terrible, but like there was some actually decent cards in there that synergized together. Surprising to say.
Right.
Actually, now that I think about it, I think I had a Zoroark break in there.
Well, there we go.
Yeah, just mash it all
Yeah.
up together.
Sounds
All right.
fun. Yeah.
I know you said you were a Reggie guy for a while.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, what are some other decks that you've played that you've really enjoyed playing that we haven't talked about?
So, kind of depends on how far back we go, admittedly.
Yeah.
If we're talking decks I've done well with, um, I had a lot of fun playing Rapid Strike Malamar back when that was a deck.
Yeah.
Loved that. I made my first regional day two with that deck about a little over a year ago now.
Yeah.
Um, had a great time with that. Simple one prize deck that you just build a hand, shuffle it back in, go
Hmm.
right, Cynthia every turn. It
Right.
was fun. Um, but going back to like when I was in seniors, I really enjoyed playing Turbo Lapras back when that was a deck, namely in the I believe this was breakthrough to Forbidden Lights format.
Hmm.
Um, I might no, I think that's correct. I might be mistaken though. I get my XY Sun Moon formats messed up a bit, but basically, this deck was just play four Aqua Patch, play four Max Elixir, hit a turn one Lapras like with a choice. It was a choice band at the time,
Yeah.
and you could hit 190 into like anything. You had other water attackers, namely White Curum and Volcanion Prism Star. Like were really
Hmm.
good cards for the deck. Um, yeah, it was a lot of fun. Actually, it wasn't even that bad either, but it was kind of just like a worse Buzzwole Lycanroc. But to
Yeah.
me, it was more fun. It was more explosive than Buzzrock. So
Yeah.
you could like if you drew hot, you were better than Buzzrock. But if you
Hmm.
didn't like pop off turn one, then you were just a worse Buzzrock. But it was a good time.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sun and Moon is probably era is probably
Mm,
some of my favorite decks.
for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's all the questions I have for you.
Yep.
If there's anything else you have for me, I think we're good.
Not in particular, I don't think.
Awesome. Well, thank you for taking your time for letting me interview you. It was a pleasure getting to meet you, pleasure getting to hear your process with the deck.
Yeah. Thank
And
you.
maybe I'll see you at NAIC.
Probably will.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Christian.
Yeah. No problem.
So.